Hey folks, Captain Mike here from Hogy Lure Company. Just got back from producing an awesome Salty Cape TV episode, Deep Jigging for Bluefin Tuna. You can check out the episode here. Now, in this shoot with Salty Cape, we cover all aspects of deep jigging for tuna, but for today's Hogy how-to, I want to spotlight on our deep jigging technique. So we had the challenge of targeting bluefin tuna keyed in on the bottom, grubbing on sand eels, and it was only 140 feet, but it was windy and the tide was going with the wind, so we had very fast drifts, so we needed all the weight to get down. We had a very specific jig technique to keep that jig right in the zone using our electronics. Well, let's roll the tape. So the technique we're using today is speed jigging, but we also know the fish are hanging close to the bottom. So it's going to be speed jigging for a very short duration and then drop and repeat, versus a lot of times I think of speed jigging as a technique where you're going to be fishing all levels of the water column. Not today. Our hits are going to come on the bottom 20 feet of the 140 feet that we're in. So I'm going to err on a slightly heavier jig, because as we drift, I don't want to get too much scope. That makes it challenging to work that 20 foot water column on the bottom, because as you scope out, the line angle changes and you have drag and lift of the lure. So that's why we're going with the 12.5 ounce Hogy sand eel jig, a bright high vis color. Green's the color, but my experience is when they're on green and it's in rough sporty conditions, a brighter version of a green, such as this albicrack and a green chartreuse, so the glow belly, that helps get spotted. And so what we're going to do is send this bait straight down to the bottom. Now I'm using short 5'9" jigging rod, a spinning rod. I like spinning rods for this style of fishing. That's personal preference. What I like about the spinning rod is I'm using my strong arm to work the rod. I'm righty, and my left hand to collect the line. So just short little jigs. I'm reeling, jigging, reeling, jigging, reeling, jigging. Now imagining I'm about 25, 30 feet off the bottom, it's going to send it right back down to the bottom. Now when I talk about sending down to the bottom, you want to be very careful letting it down, because a lot of times the hits come on the drop, and that's just going to feel like your line stopping when it shouldn't. And so usually the hits when you're working it fast up on the water column are more aggressive versus when you get a hit on the drop like this. That's why I like to keep my hand on the line like this, because as it's dropping down, if it stops sooner than I expect, my fingers will tell me. In that situation, if it stops going out when I'm expecting to, I just close the bail and reel. Because don't forget, that fish is hitting from below, so if it grabs it and comes up, you might have to reel, a dozen cranks before you feel, pressure at all, or certainly full pressure on the fish. Now, once my angle gets more like 45 degrees off the tip to the water, that's when I bring it all the way up. But I take my time to fish it all the way up. Just because these fish are hanging on the bottom doesn't mean you don't get a hit coming up. Back up top, sending it down, nice little mark on the bottom. There we go. Got one. There we go. Yeah, it's a tuna. There we go. Yeah, they are just hanging right on the bottom. And tighten up my drag a little. Still doesn't fully know it's hooked yet, I don't think. It now knows it's hooked. As we get this fish closer to the boat, it's coming in on the ideal side. And I want to have the boat be on the downwind side of this fish, because what I don't want to do is have the boat drift over the fish. Keeping pressure on it, I land it. It's not ideal conditions, gaffing your own fish, but we're gonna make it work today. Got my gloves on, my gaff handy. The fish is positioned on the right corner of the boat. The boat is downwind, so we're drifting away from the fish as opposed to on top of the fish. Now, when I go to land this fish, there's two ways I can go. I can either hold the rod in one hand and gaff in the other, or I can spike the rod in the rod holder. Now, again, it's not ideal for one person to land their own fish, but in this situation, it's all we got. We got George on the camera and just me here. But sometimes you have multiple hookups, so you need to do it yourself. So on a smaller fish like this, you can do it either way. But what I'm gonna do is hopefully not free spool the fish, is I'm gonna leave maybe a rod and a half, 2 rod length of line out. Get happy with it. And tighten the drag just a tick. I'm gonna spike this rod in the holder. Now I have a good line on this fish. Gaff handy here. Got a headshot and aim for his head. Got it right in the head. Bring this fish right over. Not pretty, but it works. First tuna on the board for the season. And get this guy taken care of. Practice some catch and release going forward. So let's just take a deep dive on the Hogy sand eel jig and why a lure shaped like this is so effective. Well, for starters, this lure could fall, the Hogy sand eel jig could fall in the knife jig category in that it's long and slender, which is designed to sink quickly through the water column with the least amount of resistance. So, you know, ergonomically, this lure is designed to sink very quickly and efficiently. The second factor to this is the lure's multi-dimensional shapes. I don't really know an easier way to describe it. For starters, we're going to call it the port side on this one. You'll see down the side of the bait what I'm going to call a ridge line here, so a high center point, so it's got an angle on either side. Now, when this bait is falling, particularly when it's being fished, you know, series of short jigs, it's going to want to rest to one side. It's going to give the bait a very high flutter factor when fished, you know, when vertically jigged in short spatial intervals. Now, the other thing I want to mention about this lure that is flat on one side, so it's going to really err on going down, but where we're going to introduce some random flutter nature to it is the lure's irregular shape. You can see it has a curvature to the bait sort of imparted throughout the lure. So with one side being flat, again, the port side with a ridge line, and then some random twists in the mold to give it a flutter factor. No two falls of this bait are going to be the same. So like today when we were targeting the bottom, you know, 30 feet of the water column, whether we were speed jigging, reeling it up and dropping, so that lure, when it's constantly being moved before it settles in for a fast sink, is going to have a ton of action. If you do the twitch jig like we were also doing, the lure is going to fall and twitch. So when you are working the bait, the jig is just going to come alive. So you get two things with this. One, fast sink rate, get it down quickly. Two, a maximum amount of action when you're fishing. Now, as we wrap up talking about fishing with the Hogy sand eel jig, just want to show how I store my jigs. This is my heavy jig bag. A lot of folks ask, you know, how do you store your jigs? These are heavy jigs. They bounce around. Certainly not a Plano tackle box, because these will punch right through, bouncing around, especially on a day like today. But you know, at Hogy we have these mesh roll-up bags. You can hose the bag down literally with the jigs inside. And this is my big jig bag. This is in the large roll-up bag. My medium jigs are in the medium bag, and obviously my smaller jigs are in the small bag, but they're all with assist hooks. I put them in rigged or unrigged. That's the beauty of the single hooks in the bag. Just if you're a little careful, you have no issues with the hooks on them. Then you can just roll the bag up, put it in your mesh bag, your mesh crate, and you're good to go. You can hose this thing off in its entirety, and you're good to go.